He was a powerful CEO attending a glamorous winter gala, but nothing could have prepared him for what he saw across the room. His ex-wife, standing with four little boys who looked exactly like him. Why hadn't she told him? How could he have missed 5 years of their lives? And more importantly, can a man who built an empire learn how to become a father? If you believe in second chances, in love, and in the power of family, click like and subscribe to support more heartfelt stories like this one. Have you ever stood in a room full of people, yet felt completely alone? That was how Jonathan Whitaker felt as he sipped his third glass of champagne beneath the shimmering chandeliers of the Fairmont Boston Grand. Outside, snow dusted the cobblestone sidewalks like powdered sugar, and inside, 100 of the city's wealthiest elite danced beneath lights and lies. It was the kind of winter night that looked like magic in photos, but in real life felt hollow, especially if you had no one real to share it with. Jonathan adjusted his cufflinks and forced a smile at another board member's joke. At 45, he had learned how to be charming without revealing anything at all. As CEO of Whitaker Dynamics, a tech empire built from the ground up, he was the man people envied, respected, or feared, but never truly knew. "Shame Elaine couldn't make it," said Richard Parson, chairman of the board, swirling his wine as if he actually cared. Jonathan offered a tight smile. Last-minute migraine. The truth was, his fiancée Elaine hadn't wanted him to come alone. Lately, her questions about his past had been growing sharper, like little razors wrapped in silk. She didn't like when he went anywhere she couldn't follow. But tonight, Jonathan had insisted. He needed space. He needed silence. He didn't expect his whole world to crack open with one glance. It happened while he reached for a fresh glass of champagne. Just across the ballroom, framed by gold-trimmed curtains and the faint glow of a fireplace, stood a woman in a deep navy dress. Her copper-brown hair spilled down in soft waves, simple and untouched by the artificial gloss around her. And beside her, four small boys, all with the same sharp gray eyes, the same dimpled chin, the same expression of cautious curiosity. His expression. Jonathan's hand stopped midair. The room faded. The music became a distant echo in his ears. "John, you all right?" Richard's voice cut through the haze, but Jonathan didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the impossible. Four identical boys, no older than 5, and their mother, Charlotte Winslow, the woman he hadn't seen since the day they signed their divorce papers nearly 6 years ago. The woman he had once loved more than anything, until ambition pulled him away. The woman he had thought he'd left behind. But she was here, and the boys were his. He felt the air leave his lungs. Jonathan didn't remember walking toward her, only that suddenly he was standing a few feet away from Charlotte, his ex-wife, and the 4 boys whose faces had just rewritten the last 5 years of his life. She saw him before he could say a word. Her eyes widened, color drained from her cheeks. She stiffened, instinctively placing one hand on the shoulder of the boy closest to her, as if preparing to shield all 4 from him. The boys turned one by one, curious, and in that moment, he saw it again. The eyes, his eyes, 4 sets of them, watching, waiting. "Mom," one of the boys asked, tugging at her dress, "who's that man?" Charlotte didn't answer immediately. She was too busy trying to breathe. Jonathan swallowed hard. "Charlotte," he said softly, "we need to talk." He hadn't said her name in years, but now it felt like something sacred, heavy, fragile. She looked around, then back at him. "I wondered when this day would come," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I just didn't expect it to be in front of 100 people and a string quartet playing Sinatra." Jonathan opened his mouth to speak, but couldn't form the words. Every inch of him ached with the weight of the moment. He looked down at the 4 small faces. "Are they?" His voice broke. She nodded once. "Yes." She turned to the boys and gently knelt down beside them. "Boys, this is Jonathan." There was a pause. "No, your father." No explanations. Just a name. A tremble beneath the surface. One of the boys took a step forward. He had a navy blue bow tie and scuffed black shoes. His gaze was steady, direct. "I'm Henry," he said, lifting his chin. "Sam," said the second, in a dark green sweater vest, adjusting his little glasses like a miniature professor. The third boy wore gray, his hands tucked behind his back. I'm Caleb. I like to draw. And the fourth, the smallest, peeked out from behind Charlotte, shy but curious. I'm Noah. I like dragons. Jonathan's heart twisted. He had missed all of it. The naming, the first steps, the bedtime stories, the scraped knees and belly laughs and birthday candles. 5 years of life, gone. His knees felt weak, but he managed to crouch down to their level, ignoring the expensive tuxedo and polished shoes. You're all incredible, he said softly, looking from face to face. I didn't know. I swear to you, I didn't know. Charlotte's lips pressed into a thin line. I tried, Jonathan, she said, standing now, voice firmer. After the divorce, I left messages. I wrote letters. I even came by your office once. But your assistant said you were traveling every time. Jonathan's expression changed. I never received anything. Of course you didn't, she snapped quietly, though her voice was trembling. Because I wasn't a shareholder or a contract or someone you could leverage. I was just the woman you walked away from. His shoulders slumped. Charlotte, I didn't walk away from you. You thought there'd be time later, she interrupted. There wasn't. There was a pause. Then one of the boys, Sam, tugged on Charlotte's hand. Mom, I'm hungry. Me too, said Henry, looking up at her with the kind of open expectation children have when they trust the world to keep spinning. Jonathan glanced around, then spotted a quiet hallway just off the ballroom. There's a lounge down there, he said. Let me order something. For them. For all of us. Please. Charlotte hesitated, but then Noah looked up at her with pleading eyes and said, Mom, I want to try the chocolate fountain. That did it. She gave a silent nod. Jonathan turned to the boys. I'll get you something sweet, all right? But only if you promise to tell me which of you likes dragons the most. Noah's hand shot into the air, making the others giggle. As Jonathan flagged down a server and ordered some desserts, Charlotte led the boys down the corridor toward a quiet alcove with low couches and flickering fireplace light. When Jonathan joined them moments later, 4 little hands were already deep into cupcakes and chocolate-covered strawberries. He sat beside Charlotte, unsure what to say. I never imagined I'd be introducing you to them like this, she said, staring into the fire. I never imagined I had anything to be introduced to, he replied. The room fell silent except for the muffled giggles of children and the crackling of the fire. They're incredible, Adon, he said again, watching Sam explain something to Caleb using a strawberry as a model of the solar system. They're my entire world, Charlotte whispered. Jonathan nodded, his chest heavy. I want to know them, he said at last. I want to know everything. Charlotte looked at him for a long time. Her eyes were no longer furious, just tired, cautious, protective. We'll see, she said softly. One step at a time. They say when the past and present collide, only one truth can remain. And for Jonathan Whitaker, that truth was now staring at him with cold, calculating eyes and perfectly painted lips. Jonathan, came the voice, sweet like poison honey. He turned, too late. She was already walking toward him. Elaine Monroe, his fiancée, the woman he had planned to marry this spring in Florence, under a sky full of white roses and wealthy guests. Her red dress clung to her like it had been sewn directly onto her body. She looked like power, like control, like something that didn't belong in this soft, golden-lit lounge filled with chocolate-smudged 5-year-olds. Behind her, cameras flashed, brief, accidental bursts from cell phones and curious guests. But one man stood out. He wasn't just watching, he was aiming, quietly, professionally. A phone angled just enough to catch Jonathan's face beside Charlotte's. And the boys. Jonathan clocked him instantly. Not just a guest, not a bored partygoer. This man was here for something or someone. But there was no time to react. Elaine had already arrived. There you are, darling, she said through clenched teeth. Funny, I didn't see you at the entrance. Jonathan rose from the low leather sofa slowly, placing himself between Elaine and the children, who had gone very still, watching her with wide eyes. Elaine, I can explain, he said quickly, hands raised slightly in instinctive defense. Her gaze swept over the room like a laser scan, pausing on Charlotte for the briefest moment, then locking in on the boys. Her lips parted. She blinked and whispered, What the hell is this? Caleb, the quiet one, leaned toward Charlotte and whispered, "Why is the lady so mad?" Elaine heard that. She stepped forward, eyes burning. "Jonathan, who are these children?" Before he could answer, Henry, bold and brave as ever, stood up and said, "We're the Whitaker boys." Elaine's eyes widened. Charlotte gently placed a hand on his shoulder. "Henry," but the boy pushed forward, clearly proud. "I'm Henry Whitaker. That's Sam, Caleb, and Noah. We're 5, and that's our mom." Silence. Absolute silence. Elaine's hands curled into fists. "Whitaker?" she spat. "Are you telling me these children are yours?" Jonathan inhaled, trying to hold his ground. "I only found out tonight. I swear to you, Elaine, I didn't know they existed." "And I'm supposed to believe that?" She laughed bitterly, scanning the room again. 4 carbon copies of you, and you just found out? That's rich, Jonathan, even for you." "I tried to tell him," Charlotte interjected, voice calm but tight. "Years ago, he never got my letters or my calls." Elaine turned to her, venom dripping. "And you waited 5 years to do what? Parade your kids around like a surprise gift at a gala? What's your angle?" Charlotte stood, taller than Elaine, steadier. "My angle is survival," she said simply. "Raising 4 boys on my own wasn't a strategy. It was life." Jonathan felt the tremor in his own voice as he added, "Elaine, please, let's talk somewhere else." But before she could respond, his phone buzzed. A message. Unknown number. "Nice little family reunion you had. High-resolution images available. Shall we talk price before I go to the press?" Attached was a photo. Jonathan crouched beside the boys, Charlotte in the background, Caleb handing him a drawing. He felt his blood run cold. Someone had been watching, documenting. He looked up, scanning the crowd. But the man was gone. Elaine saw the expression on his face. "What is it now?" Jonathan simply showed her the message. She read it, then threw her hands in the air. "This is what I was afraid of. You let your past walk right into your future, and now, look, we're tabloid bait." "I don't care about the tabloids," he said, voice low. "I care about those boys." Elaine stared at him, stunned. "Those boys," she repeated. "Those boys." He nodded, and in that moment, something inside her snapped. "So that's it then," she hissed. "You're choosing them." Jonathan's next words weren't planned. They weren't polished. But they were true. "They're my children, Elaine." And then came the slap. Hard, loud, across the face. Caleb gasped. Noah whimpered. Sam stared, frozen. Charlotte stepped forward instinctively. Elaine trembled. "You're a fool," she whispered. "You've thrown away everything." She turned on her heel and vanished into the crowd. Jonathan stood there, cheek burning, heart thunderous in his chest. Charlotte came closer. "You okay?" she asked quietly. He nodded once, eyes still locked on the doorway. "I'm more okay than I've been in years." At 5:47 a.m., long before the city stirred, Jonathan Whitaker stood barefoot in the marble kitchen of his penthouse, staring out at the Boston skyline. The snow had returned, soft and steady. Everything looked calm, silent, beautiful. But his mind was on fire. That photo, the message, the eyes of 4 children looking to him like he was something important, something permanent. He couldn't lose this again. Not now, not after just finding them. His phone lit up. Victor Grant, Director of Private Security, incoming call. He answered before the first ring finished. "Victor," Jonathan said, "I need full protection. Today. For 5 people. One of them is me." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "I assume this isn't just a paranoid CEO request?" Victor asked. Jonathan exhaled. "No, it's about my children." Victor didn't ask any more questions. "We'll be there by sunrise." By 7:00 a.m., 2 unmarked SUVs rolled into the quiet street outside a small red brick apartment building nestled near Boston's South End. It wasn't the kind of place people expected to see the richest man in the city. But that morning, Jonathan Whitaker walked up those steps with snow on his coat, his heart pounding harder than it had in any boardroom. Charlotte opened the door before he could knock. Her hair was tied back, her expression guarded, but her eyes, as always, were honest. "You came," she said quietly. "I said I would." Inside, the apartment was small but alive. Toys were scattered across the floor. Crayon drawings hung on the fridge. A blanket fort occupied the corner of the living room like a proud monument to imagination. The boys were awake. Somewhere deeper in the apartment, their laughter rang out, pure and unfiltered. Jonathan stood there for a moment, just listening. "I brought help," he said finally, gesturing to the man behind him. Victor stepped forward, nodding politely. "Mr. Winslow, I'm Victor Grant. Mr. Whitaker has asked me to make sure your family is protected. Discreetly, but thoroughly." Charlotte looked at Jonathan, her jaw tightening. "You think this is going to get worse?" "I know it is," Jonathan replied. "Someone's watching. Someone has photos. And if they know where you live, they'll come knocking." He nodded. Charlotte hesitated, then stepped aside. "All right," she said, "but only because of the boys." Victor moved swiftly, placing 2 men on surveillance outside, one at the rear exit and another stationed in an unmarked car nearby. He was efficient, professional, invisible. Within 30 minutes, Charlotte's apartment felt safer. Not perfect, but better. When the boys emerged, still in pajamas, rubbing sleep from their eyes, they were surprised but not alarmed. "Mom said you were coming," Sam announced, pushing up his glasses. Jonathan knelt down, smiling. "She was right, and I brought donuts." That earned him 4 cheers and a hug from Noah, so enthusiastic he nearly knocked Jonathan over. As the morning wore on, Jonathan stayed. He didn't check his emails. He didn't answer the board's questions. He sat on the floor, helping Caleb build a puzzle of the United States. He watched Sam sketch a solar system with alarming scientific precision. He listened to Henry read out loud from a book about space travel, mispronouncing astronaut as ashnaut, and he laughed harder than he had in years when Noah tied a superhero cape around his shoulders and declared, "You're super dad now." Charlotte watched it all unfold from the kitchen, arms crossed, unsure whether to feel overwhelmed or deeply moved. After the boys had gone off to play in their room, Jonathan joined her. "You're good with them," she said simply. "I've had 5 years to imagine what I'd do if I ever met them." Charlotte looked at him carefully. "And now that you have, I don't want to miss another second." She studied him, unsure whether to believe it. "It's not always easy, Jonathan. They don't sleep through the night. They get sick at the same time. They fight, they break things, they draw on walls. I can handle it." "You say that now," she said with a hint of a smile. He stepped closer. "Let me be part of this, please. However you want, however you'll allow it." Charlotte didn't answer immediately, but she didn't say no. Instead, she nodded toward the refrigerator. "They've been working on drawings for a family tree. You're not on it yet. Maybe you could help them finish it?" Jonathan's chest ached. "I'd be honored." The first thing Jonathan noticed when he stepped into the boys' shared room was the color. Every wall, every corner, every bunk bed was alive with energy. A rocket ship sticker here, a dinosaur poster there, shelves full of well-loved books, mismatched toys and drawings, dozens of them, taped in crooked lines like a timeline of their young lives. The boys didn't stop playing when he entered. They barely paused. To them, he wasn't a guest anymore. He was someone. That meant everything. "Want to see my volcano?" Sam asked, already pulling a shoebox contraption toward him. "It doesn't erupt yet, but I have baking soda and vinegar somewhere." Before Jonathan could reply, Noah pounced onto the bed, brandishing a plastic dragon. "He breathes fire and eats all the bad guys. Sometimes he even eats broccoli." Caleb was quieter. He sat cross-legged on the floor, focused entirely on a drawing. His fingers moved with precision, his tongue poking slightly out of the corner of his mouth. He didn't look up until Jonathan knelt beside him. "What are you drawing?" Jonathan asked gently. Caleb turned the page. It was a family. 4 boys standing side by side, a woman with long hair, and a man with a briefcase in one hand and a book in the other. The resemblance was unmistakable. "Is that me?" Caleb nodded. "I had to guess your tie color." Jonathan's throat tightened. "You got it right." Henry, the oldest by 8 minutes, according to Charlotte, was standing near the bunk beds, arms crossed, watching. "Are you really going to stay this time?" he asked bluntly. Jonathan turned to face him fully. "I want to, if you'll let me." Henry shrugged. "We already know how to ride bikes and build forts and read chapter books." Jonathan smiled. "Then maybe you can teach me something." A pause, then Henry smirked. Okay, but you have to wear the dragon cape. Jonathan raised an eyebrow. The same one Noah wore? Henry nodded solemnly. It's the rule. Within minutes, the CEO of Whitaker Dynamics was crawling on the floor wearing a felt cape and holding a plastic sword, fending off imaginary dragons and joining in a top-secret mission to Mars involving couch cushions and cardboard tubes. Charlotte passed by the door once, leaning against the frame, arms crossed, amused, bewildered, and just a little wistful. When bedtime came, Jonathan helped them brush their teeth, something he hadn't done since he was a teenager babysitting his younger cousins. He read aloud from The Adventures of Captain Starglow, a slightly crinkled paperback with pages so worn it was clear it had been read dozens of times. The boys gathered around him on the floor, heads resting against his legs, eyes wide with wonder. As he turned the last page and read the final line, and no matter how dark the sky, Captain Starglow always found his way home. The room was silent. I like that part, Caleb whispered. So do I, Jonathan replied, voice thick. They were asleep minutes later, each tucked into their bunk bed, each with a piece of his heart. Charlotte handed him a mug of tea as they stood in the kitchen afterward. You survived, she teased. He smiled. Barely. She leaned against the counter, watching him. You know, they'll test you, especially Henry. He's got this thing about trust. If you say you're coming, and you don't, I'll come, Jonathan said firmly. I'm serious, Jonathan. They've gotten used to it just being the five of us. I don't want them hurt. He nodded slowly. Neither do I. That's why I'm not going anywhere. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she handed him a piece of paper. Caleb's drawing. The family portrait. Take this with you, she said, in case you forget what matters. He stared at the image. Those four faces, the woman with kind eyes, the man who had finally arrived. I won't forget, he said, and he meant it. It was barely 8:15 a.m. when Jonathan Whitaker stepped out of his private elevator and into the sleek, polished corridor of Whitaker Dynamics' executive floor. Everything was exactly as he'd left it. The scent of eucalyptus diffused through the air, the quiet click of high heels against marble, and the echo of urgent conversations behind closed glass doors. But Jonathan felt foreign, like a man visiting a life he once lived but no longer belonged to. His assistant, Dana, greeted him with her usual efficiency, but there was a hint of uncertainty in her eyes. Good morning, Mr. Whitaker. Your meeting with the CFO and legal team begins in 15 minutes. Also, she hesitated. He raised an eyebrow. What is it? There's a reporter waiting in the lobby. Says he has photos. He asked for a quote about your quadruplets revelation. Jonathan's stomach sank. They've already gone public? Not yet, she whispered, but he hinted he's willing to sell it to the right bidder. Jonathan clenched his jaw. So it begins. Have security escort him out, he said calmly, and find out who he works for. Yes, sir. He walked into his office. Everything was where he left it, his awards, his oversized desk, the wall of floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city he once ruled like a chessboard. But now the skyline didn't feel powerful. It felt distant. He opened his drawer and pulled out the folded drawing Charlotte had given him. Caleb's family sketch. The man with the briefcase and the book. 4 identical boys. He stared at it, then gently placed it on his desk, right in the center where everyone would see. The meeting began promptly. Numbers, strategies, projections, a discussion about an impending merger that had consumed 3 years of boardroom battles. But Jonathan couldn't focus. Halfway through a slide about European market projections, his phone buzzed with a message from Charlotte. Henry's class is doing presentations today at 1 o'clock. He wanted to invite you but was too nervous. I thought you'd want to know. His heart thudded. He looked at the boardroom table. 15 executives, charts, graphs, then at his phone again. It wasn't even a question. Gentlemen, he said, cutting through the discussion, I'll need to step out by noon. There was a pause. Is everything all right? Asked Gerald, the CFO, glancing at the others. I have a more important meeting. The room stilled. Jonathan leaned back, eyes steady. My son is giving a presentation on planets. I missed the first 5 years of his life. I won't miss another afternoon. Some smiled, others exchanged concerned glances. But Jonathan didn't care. He left before anyone could argue. At 12:55 p.m., he stood outside Henry's classroom, shifting awkwardly in a child-sized plastic chair. The walls were covered in painted constellations and solar systems made from construction paper and glitter. Henry spotted him through the doorway. Their eyes met. And in that one glance, something shifted. The boy's shoulders straightened. His face lit up. He waved. Jonathan waved back. When Henry stepped up to present his homemade model of the planets, 8 foam balls strung on a coat hanger, his voice trembled only once. Then he said with quiet confidence, "My dad helped me with the Saturn rings. He says real engineers use imagination too." Jonathan felt something warm bloom in his chest. When the presentation ended, the applause of a dozen parents couldn't compare to the look on Henry's face. Pride. Belonging. Afterward, Jonathan crouched beside him. "You were amazing," he whispered. Henry shrugged, trying to be cool. "I was okay." "You were brave," Jonathan added. "That matters more." Henry smiled shyly. Back at the office, missed calls blinked across his screen. But Jonathan didn't care, because for the first time in his life, he had shown up, not as a CEO, not as a billionaire, but as a father. It started with a headline: "Tech Tycoon's Secret, Children Exposed. Meet the Whitaker Quadruplets." Then came the photos, clear, cruel, and intimate. Jonathan crouching beside the boys, Charlotte smiling faintly in the background, Caleb handing over a drawing. Even a shot of all 4 children pointing toward a chocolate fountain, their faces lit with innocent joy. Moments that had been private, sacred, now plastered across the internet like scandalous evidence. The media frenzy exploded overnight. Talk shows dissected his love life. Finance blogs speculated about inheritance. One political podcast even called it a strategic family reveal to humanize a cold CEO. Jonathan didn't sleep that night. Instead, he sat in the dark corner of his penthouse living room, his phone glowing with chaos, notifications, calls, speculation. And worst of all, comments. Thousands of them. Some were sympathetic, others weren't. He abandoned his kids for years. Now he wants applause? Another rich guy caught hiding a second family. At least the kids are cute. They'll need that in therapy. At 6:12 a.m., Charlotte called. Her voice was tight, tired. "They're outside the building," she whispered. 3 vans. A woman with a boom mic tried to follow Caleb into school. Jonathan stood up, rage crackling under his skin. "I'm on my way." He didn't shower, didn't eat, just grabbed his coat and keys and ran. By 6:45, he stood outside Charlotte's modest building, flanked by security. Photographers snapped photos calling his name. Reporters shoved microphones forward. "Mr. Whitaker, did you know about the children before this week? Are you using this to cover your company's tax issues? Is Charlotte Winslow receiving a payout?" He didn't answer. He pushed through the crowd, up the stairs and into the apartment. The boys were on the sofa in pajamas, eyes wide, staring at the TV. The screen showed them, their faces, their names. Jonathan lunged forward and clicked it off. "I'm sorry," he said, breathless. "I didn't protect you fast enough." Henry looked up, his eyes sharp. "Why are they saying Mom tricked you?" Jonathan felt like he'd been punched. He knelt down. Because sometimes people care more about stories than the truth, and they don't understand what we've been through. Caleb sniffled. "I don't like cameras." "You won't have to see them again," Jonathan promised. Charlotte appeared in the hallway, arms folded, her face pale but her tone solid. "You can't fix this with money, Jonathan." "I know," he replied, "which is why I'm going to fix it with time." She arched a brow. "Time?" "I'm stepping down," he said. The room froze. Charlotte blinked. "From your company?" He nodded. "I already called the board. I'll stay on as chairman. But the CEO title is a distraction now, a risk. I can't lead the company and protect you at the same time." Silence. Even the boys had stopped moving. "You're giving up everything," she whispered. "I'm not giving up anything," he said firmly. "I'm finally choosing." Charlotte sat beside him slowly, like the air had shifted in the room. "I never asked you to—" "I know." "Ah," he cut in. "But I have 4 sons who need me. Not in a press release, not in court documents, in real life." He looked around the room at the drawings on the wall, the cereal boxes on the counter, the mismatched socks scattered across the floor. It was messy, loud, imperfect. It was home. Charlotte touched his hand. Are you sure? Jonathan met her eyes. I've never been more sure of anything. The conference room had never felt this silent. No clinking glasses, no murmured side conversations. Not even the shuffling of papers. Just rows of reporters and cameras, all pointed at a single podium with a modest sign, Whitaker Foundation, press event. Charlotte sat in the front row, calm on the outside, hands tight in her lap. The boys weren't there, thankfully. Margaret, Jonathan's longtime assistant, had taken them out for ice cream, away from the chaos. But the pressure in the room was immense. Jonathan stepped up to the podium slowly. No suit, no tie. Just a dark sweater, slacks, and a heart that hadn't stopped racing in 3 days. He took a breath, then spoke. Thank you all for coming. I'd like to begin by saying this isn't a corporate statement. This is a personal one, Bodo. The cameras clicked to life. A week ago, I discovered I am the father of 4 extraordinary boys. Their names are Henry, Sam, Caleb, and Noah. They are 5 years old, they love chocolate, dragons, and space, and they make the best messes I've ever seen. A soft chuckle rippled through the room. But for 5 years, I didn't know they existed. And because of that, I missed 5 birthdays, 5 sets of first steps, 5 years of hugs and bedtime stories. I'll never get those years back. He paused. Let the silence hold the weight. There's been speculation about cover-ups, about secret families. Let me be clear, there was no deception, just an unfortunate silence, one I deeply regret. The mother of my children, Charlotte Winslow, tried to reach me. I didn't listen. That was my failure. A murmur moved through the crowd. Jonathan lifted his chin. But this isn't a story about shame. This is a story about second chances, about the power of showing up. Charlotte's eyes glistened. Jonathan continued, I've made the decision to step down as CEO of Whitaker Dynamics. That role has demanded every part of me for nearly 2 decades. But it's time to give the most important part of myself to my family. Click, 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 cameras flashed. That said, I believe that no parent should have to choose between financial survival and being present. Too many mothers and fathers are forced to work 3 jobs, miss birthdays, and juggle school pickups with hospital bills. He cleared his throat, voice steady now. That's why today I'm announcing the launch of the Whitaker Family Foundation, an organization dedicated to supporting single parents, funding early education, and ensuring that no child feels forgotten. Gasps and whispers filled the room. Jonathan smiled faintly. And I'm proud to announce that Charlotte Winslow will serve as the foundation's executive director. She understands more than anyone what it means to raise a family with love, resilience, and very little sleep. Or reporters raised their hands frantically. Jonathan nodded to one. Mr. Whitaker, is this a long-term change or just a PR move in response to recent media leaks? Jonathan didn't blink. This is permanent. The company is in capable hands. But my children have only one father. Another reporter. Do you fear this will hurt investor confidence? He glanced at Charlotte. I think authenticity builds trust, not the other way around. One more question. A young journalist, barely out of college, asked, how have your sons reacted to all of this? Jonathan's voice softened. They don't care about headlines. They just want someone to help fix toy rockets, watch them perform in school plays, and sit next to them at night when the world feels scary. The room fell quiet again. He looked into the camera now, as if speaking directly to someone far away. To every child who's ever waited by the window, wondering if someone will come for them, this is for you. I didn't come sooner, but I'm here now. And with that, he stepped down from the podium. Charlotte stood. They met halfway, like old friends and new allies. She reached for his hand, not for show, not for the cameras, just because it felt right. The applause that followed wasn't loud, but it was honest. And for the first time in his public life, Jonathan didn't care if the room applauded or not, because what mattered most was waiting for him at home. The penthouse was too quiet. It always had been, really. Sterile, silent, immaculate. A place of luxury, but not of life. Jonathan stood by the towering windows for what he knew would be the last time, staring out at the city skyline that had once symbolized everything he'd worked for. Now it felt like glass and echoes. He looked down at the box in his hands, drawings, a small dinosaur plushie Caleb had handed him for decoration, a superhero cape from Noah, Sam's string of paper planets, and a photo Charlotte had taken of him and the boys laughing on the couch, all piled together in one perfect chaos. He smiled. Then he closed the door and didn't look back. The real estate agent beamed as she led Jonathan and Charlotte through the quiet neighborhood nestled just outside the city, tree-lined streets, front yards dotted with children's toys, and neighbors who waved from their porches. "This next one is special," the agent said, unlocking a gate. The house was modest by Jonathan's standards, but beautiful in all the right ways. A red front door, a porch swing, 4 bedrooms upstairs, a backyard shaded by a towering oak tree, and the smell of fresh paint mixed with something warm, like memories waiting to be made. Charlotte stepped inside first. He watched her face carefully. She walked through the entryway, ran her hand along the kitchen counter, peeked into the sunlit dining room, and finally turned to him. "This feels like a house kids run through barefoot," she whispered. He nodded. "That's what I thought." In the backyard, there was space for a small garden. Maybe a swing set, maybe a sandbox, maybe a place to teach 4 boys how to camp under the stars, even if it was just in sleeping bags 10 feet from the back door. Jonathan looked around, imagining the chaos, the laughter, the spilled juice, the Saturday mornings with pancake batter in everyone's hair. It felt possible. He turned to the agent. "We'll take it." Charlotte's eyes widened. "Jonathan, it's not for me," he said gently. "It's for them." She didn't argue. She just nodded, quietly moved. Moving day came with cardboard boxes, chaos, and 4 boys wearing matching t-shirts that read Team Whitaker. Noah immediately claimed the bedroom with the biggest closet so he could build a secret lair. Caleb taped his newest drawings along the window and declared it his studio. Sam chose the room with the best sunlight for his science experiments and told Jonathan he'd need safety goggles, probably. Henry walked through the entire house 3 times, testing doors, locks, and light switches, before standing at the front porch and nodding solemnly. "This one feels safe," he said. Jonathan knelt beside him. "That's the point." Later that night, after they'd unpacked enough to make pizza and sit on the floor with paper plates, Henry whispered, "Are we staying forever?" Jonathan didn't hesitate. "As long as you want me to." Henry smiled, then turned to his brothers. "Good," he said, "because I want to build a tree house." Jonathan laughed. "Guess I'll need a ladder." Caleb added, "And a trap door." Noah shouted, "And dragon defenses." Jonathan looked around the room, Charlotte wiping pizza sauce from Sam's chin, laughter bouncing off the new walls, 4 small voices blending into one beautiful noise, and knew this was home, not the kind with marble floors and valet service, the kind where love lived in the messy moments, where bedtime stories outlasted deadlines, where heartbeats and hopes echoed louder than boardroom applause. And for the first time in years, Jonathan Whitaker slept soundly. Not above the city, but beside everything that truly mattered. The days grew colder. Boston's autumn whispered through the tree, dusting golden leaves across the Whitaker backyard. The big oak stood like a sentinel, branches wide open, waiting, just like Jonathan had been. Except now he wasn't waiting anymore. He was learning. And fatherhood, he discovered, wasn't a grand speech or a dramatic gesture. It was made of tiny moments, messy, quiet, often overlooked by the outside world. It was Caleb tiptoeing into his office at 6:00 a.m., holding up a drawing without saying a word, and Jonathan pushing aside emails just to kneel down and say, "Tell me what this part means." It was Sam crawling under the kitchen table in tears because his homemade rocket didn't launch, and Jonathan lying beside him on the floor and saying, "Let's build one that can fly." It was Noah, wild, brilliant Noah, covering the bathroom mirror with shaving cream dragons, and Jonathan biting back a lecture just long enough to see the art in the chaos. And it was Henry, always Henry, the eldest, the watchful one, the cautious heart wrapped in confidence. He tested Jonathan's promises, measured his words, cataloged his actions like a scientist studying an unpredictable variable. One night, long after the twins had fallen asleep, Jonathan found Henry sitting at the top of the stairs, knees hugged to his chest. "You okay, buddy?" Henry looked down. "You didn't call when you were late." Jonathan winced. He had gotten stuck in traffic after picking up Charlotte's dry cleaning and forgot to text. "I'm sorry," he said, sitting beside him. "I should have called. You always say you'll be there, and you were, but you were late." His voice was small but sharp, the way only a child who had once been disappointed too many times could sound. Jonathan swallowed the lump in his throat. "You're right, that's on me. When I say something, I have to mean it." Henry nodded slowly, then leaned his head against Jonathan's shoulder. It was the first time he'd done that since the day they met. Jonathan didn't speak. He just let the silence say what words couldn't. The next day, he left work early, again, and arrived at school in time for the boys' autumn recital. No suits, no ties, just a plaid shirt, a thermal jacket, and a fold-out chair in the second row of the school gym. Charlotte sat beside him, her hand brushing his for the briefest second. "You're getting good at this," she whispered. "At what?" "Being here." Her smile was quiet but genuine. When the boys took the stage, each holding a painted cardboard leaf and singing off-key about the changing seasons, Jonathan didn't care that one of them, Noah, of course, added sound effects to the wind noises. He didn't care that his phone vibrated 5 times in his pocket. All he saw was Caleb beaming when he spotted him, Sam giving a thumbs up mid-verse, Henry pretending not to look but clearly watching for his reaction, and Noah winking before launching into a howling rendition of the autumn breeze. Jonathan laughed, clapped louder than necessary, and felt something shift deep in his chest. He wasn't just a visitor anymore. He was a father. That night, after they all returned home, Charlotte found him alone in the kitchen. He was washing dishes, sleeves rolled up, hair slightly out of place. "I don't remember the last time I saw you like this," she said softly. He looked over, water dripping from his hands. "Like what?" "Messy, grounded, happy." He smiled. "I don't remember either." She came closer. "Do you miss the boardrooms?" He thought about it. "I miss the silence," he said honestly, "but not the loneliness." She leaned against the counter. "They're starting to believe in you." "I know, and that's what terrifies me." She tilted her head. "I can't fail them," he said quietly. "I can't just try. I have to be. The kind of man they can look up to even when I mess up. Especially when I mess up." Charlotte studied him for a long moment. "You already are." That night, when he kissed each boy goodnight, he lingered a little longer. He pulled the blanket over Caleb's shoulder and whispered, "Keep dreaming." He high-fived Sam and promised they'd test the rocket again on Saturday. He gently tucked Noah's stuffed dragon back under his arm. And with Henry, he simply whispered, "You can count on me." Henry didn't speak. He just nodded, eyes half closed, and Jonathan knew that small motion meant more than 1,000 words. It began, as most storms do, with silence. An article, quietly published. No fanfare, no accusations, just insinuations. From single mom to executive director, the curious rise of Charlotte Winslow. The subheading was even more pointed. Uncovering the quiet climb of the woman now controlling millions under the Whitaker Family Foundation. Jonathan read it over breakfast, the newspaper still warm from the driveway. At first, he didn't react, but as he reached the 4th paragraph, his stomach turned. While the foundation claims transparency, some insiders question the rapid elevation of a woman with no recent professional history and close personal ties to Jonathan Whitaker. It wasn't just a hit piece, it was surgical. He set the paper down slowly, his coffee untouched. Charlotte walked in moments later, still tying her hair back, cradling her own mug. "What's wrong?" she asked, instantly sensing the change in him. He slid the paper toward her. She read in silence. By the time she reached the end, her hands had curled around her mug so tightly her knuckles had gone white. "Who wrote this?" she asked, voice low. Jonathan shook his head. "No name on the byline, but I have a guess." She looked at him. "Kingston? Or someone working with him? Or someone he's paying?" Charlotte leaned back in her chair, as if the wind had been knocked out of her. "They're going after me now?" No, Jonathan said, eyes steady. They're going after us. By noon, Victor, Jonathan's trusted head of security, had tracked the article to a small, independent blog that had been bought out 2 months ago by an anonymous shell company. Same IP as the account that tried to blackmail you with the boys' photos, Victor reported. It's coordinated. Jonathan rubbed his temples. Damage? He asked. Nothing legal, said Margaret, joining the call. But the foundation's inbox is filling with questions. The board is spooked. One donor pulled out this morning. Jonathan turned to Charlotte, who stood at the window of his home office, arms folded, eyes on the street. I'm sorry, he said quietly. Her shoulders rose and fell. This was bound to happen. He walked toward her, voice low. I'll hold a press conference. Shut it down. We'll release every receipt, every document. No, she interrupted gently. Let me. He blinked. Charlotte, she turned to face him. They're trying to paint me as your puppet. If you defend me, they'll say it proves their point. But if I speak, he understood instantly. Then they'll have to face the woman they're trying to erase, she finished. The press conference was held the next day in the foundation's new headquarters, an old library building that Charlotte had insisted on restoring rather than replacing. She stood alone at the podium, no lawyers, no Jonathan, no teleprompter, just a woman in a navy dress and the kind of strength that doesn't shout, it endures. My name is Charlotte Winslow, she began, and I'm the executive director of the Whitaker Family Foundation. She paused, looked directly into the camera. 5 years ago, I was working 2 jobs and raising 4 children on my own. I've paid rent with pennies. I've cried in parking lots. I've put off doctor's appointments so my sons could have new shoes. A ripple of emotion moved through the room. I don't come from money. I don't come from a legacy, but I come from experience. And that's what qualifies me to lead this foundation. Because I know what it means to feel invisible. She placed a hand on her heart. We're not here to build power. We're here to build dignity. And I will not allow this work to be derailed by gossip, envy, or fear. The applause was immediate, standing ovation. Jonathan watched from the back of the room, eyes misted with pride. And when Charlotte turned and saw him there, silent, hands in his pockets, watching her like she was the only light in a darkening room, she gave him the smallest, softest nod. She didn't need rescuing. She never had. But knowing he was there, that made all the difference. It was supposed to be a normal Saturday. Hot chocolate, blanket forts. A plan to finally build the cardboard rocket Sam had drawn on the back of his math homework. But the knock came early, too early. Charlotte opened the door to find a woman standing there with a microphone and a cameraman hovering behind her, already filming. Miss Winslow, do you have a moment to answer questions about the foundation's finances? Charlotte slammed the door without a word. Inside, Noah and Caleb had frozen halfway through building a paper dragon. Mom, Caleb asked quietly, was that a reporter? Charlotte didn't answer. She was already dialing Jonathan's number with shaking hands. Jonathan arrived within 15 minutes, fury burning beneath his calm expression. Victor was already outside, speaking in low tones with a police officer while Charlotte wrung her hands on the porch. She followed us from the grocery store, she explained, waited until we were all home. I thought this was over, Jonathan muttered. It's never over when children are involved, Charlotte said bitterly. Inside, Henry stood by the window, arms crossed. Sam was hiding under the couch. Noah sat near the door, holding his dragon like a shield. And Caleb, sweet, sensitive Caleb, was silently tearing up his drawing. Jonathan knelt beside him. Hey, he said gently, why are you doing that? I don't want people seeing it, Caleb said. If they see it, they'll say stuff, like they said about Mom, like they said about us. Jonathan felt his heart splinter. He looked at Charlotte. They're not safe, he whispered. Not from this world. Not as long as I keep one foot in it. That night, he made his decision. He gathered the boys in the living room, Charlotte beside him, and knelt in front of them like he had that very first night. I need to tell you something, he began. The room went still. For a long time, I thought work was the most important thing. I thought winning and building something big would make me feel proud. But then I met you. He looked at each of them, at Henry's serious face, at Caleb's lowered eyes, at Noah's nervous fingers, and Sam's cautious curiosity. You changed me. You showed me what real success looks like. He paused, letting the moment breathe. I've decided to leave my company. Not just the title. Everything. The offices, the board, the meetings. I want to be here. With you. Really here. Silence. Then Sam asked, will you still wear suits? Jonathan laughed. Only if you make me. Caleb looked up. You're really staying? I am. Henry said nothing. He just walked over and placed a small, crumpled paper plane in Jonathan's hand. You forgot to fold the wings, he whispered. But I saved it. Jonathan looked down at the paper plane. Creased, worn, imperfect. It was perfect. The next morning, he drafted one final letter. It wasn't sent to investors or partners. It was sent to every employee at Whitaker Dynamics. It read, I founded this company to build technology that made life better. But now I've found something more worth building. A family. Effective immediately, I'll be stepping away from all executive and board-level responsibilities. Not in retreat, but in renewal. I leave the company in capable hands and walk into a future where I am no longer just a builder of systems, but a builder of bedtime stories, paper rockets, and pancake breakfasts. He ended it with one line. This isn't goodbye, it's hello to the life I was always meant to live. That afternoon in this backyard of the red-doored house, Charlotte watched as Jonathan taught Noah how to fly the paper plane properly. Sam gave instructions. Henry kept time. Caleb sketched the whole thing in a notebook labeled The Day Dad Stayed. Charlotte felt her heart swell with something unnameable. Gratitude, peace, love. Jonathan looked over, caught her eye, and smiled. No cameras, no headlines, just life. And the 4 reasons he would never, ever look back. 6 months later, the red-doored house no longer felt new. The creaky hallway floors sang in the mornings. The garden had sprouted sunflowers from a science project gone rogue. The swing set in the backyard was slightly crooked, thanks to Noah's insistence that dragons need extra room to land. It was spring now, soft and warm. The kind of day that smelled like cut grass, grilled cheese, and stories waiting to be told. Jonathan sat on the porch swing, a mug of coffee in hand, watching the 4 boys chase one another across the lawn with paper swords and cardboard shields. Their laughter echoed like music across the fence. Inside, Charlotte was making lemonade with far too much honey, just the way the boys liked it. She wore her favorite faded jeans and a t-shirt from the Foundation's first community event. Her hair was pulled up in a loose bun, a pencil sticking out like a flag of motherhood and management. She stepped out onto the porch and leaned against the railing. They're going to sleep well tonight, she said, smiling. They always do after a full-scale battle on the lawn, Jonathan replied. Charlotte sipped from her glass. You know, it's been 6 months. Exactly. Jonathan looked over. Since? She tilted her head. Since you moved in. Since you left the company. Since everything changed. He nodded slowly. It feels like 6 weeks and 6 years at the same time. She laughed softly. That's parenting. They fell into a comfortable silence, broken only by Noah shouting, "Prepare for doom," as he launched a pillow from the treehouse pulley system. Charlotte shook her head. I don't even remember what silence used to sound like. Jonathan studied her then, really studied her quiet strength, the way she listened before speaking, the way she let the boys argue and stumble and figure things out before stepping in, the way she looked at him, not as a man with money or failure or fame, but as a man still learning. Charlotte, he said. She turned, caught off guard by the change in his voice. He stood, pulled something from his pocket, not a ring, not a grand gesture, just a piece of paper, folded carefully. A drawing, Caleb's from months ago. It had been updated, colored, restored. It showed all 6 of them now. Charlotte, Jonathan, the boys, a dog they didn't have yet. And above the little house with the red door, in shaky capital letters, our family. Jonathan handed it to her. I don't have a speech, he said quietly. I've given too many of those in my life. But I do have this. She looked at the paper, fingers trembling slightly. I want to make this real, he continued, not just in drawings or dinners or school pickups. I want a life with you, with them, fully, permanently, if you still want that too. Charlotte looked at the paper again, then at the boys, then at him. And she smiled, not the smile of surprise or flattery, but the kind of smile that said, "Finally, I never stopped wanting that," she said. He pulled her close, arms wrapping around her like roots, steady and sure. She pressed her cheek to his shoulder, eyes closed. The sun was setting behind them, casting gold across the grass and turning the sky into a canvas of oranges and blues. The boys kept playing, unaware that their world had just grown even more solid. Caleb yelled from the treehouse, "Mom, Dad, look, we built a bridge between the forts." Charlotte looked up and laughed. "Of course they did." Jonathan grinned. "Well then, we'd better cross it, together." And hand in hand, they walked out to meet the bridge their children had built, between past and future, between fear and faith, between being broken and finally fully whole. Not perfect, but real, and forever. Sometimes the most beautiful second chances come not in grand gestures, but in bedtime stories, backyard forts, and whispered promises in the dark. This is not just a story about a billionaire and four little boys. It's a story about choosing love over legacy, presence over power, and home over everything else. If this story touched your heart, leave us a comment below. Tell us what part moved you most. And if you believe in second chances and the power of family, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more heartfelt stories just like this one. We're so glad you're here.